Welcome to this deep dive. You guys sent in a ton of articles on Athol Fugard, the playwright who
Mhm.
just passed away, and, well, we're here to, unpack all that.
Yeah, it's a lot more than just like his life story, though that's fascinating too.
Right.
But we really want to dig into why Fugard mattered so much to South Africa, to theater, and I think to anyone who believes art can actually, change things.
Okay, so South Africa, that's key here, right?
Yeah.
Fugard's whole life was basically happening during this intense period,
Uh-huh.
apartheid, that a lot of listeners probably, I don't know, only know from, history books.
Yeah, and it's tough to really grasp, Imagine like your race determines everything. Where you live, work, who you can even marry.
Wow.
That was apartheid, enforced by these brutal laws. You're constantly being watched. It was a lot.
And Fugard, he was white, but he chose to oppose all that, to, speak up for those who couldn't.
Exactly. And this is where it gets interesting. He didn't just write alone, locked in a room.
Yeah.
He collaborated deeply with Black actors, John Catine, Winston and Shona. They were more than colleagues.
Oh, yeah. One article actually quotes Kinhine calling Fugard brother.
Right. That's powerful stuff. They were putting their lives on the line to make art that challenged the whole system.
So it wasn't just putting on a show. It was like a form of resistance.
Very much so. And that collaboration, it shaped the plays themselves. It wasn't some white guy speaking for the oppressed. It was this fusion of voices, experiences.
And that's why it resonated, right?
Uh,
Beyond South Africa, even.
Partly, yeah. Fugard was tapping into universal things, the desire for dignity, fighting injustice, love, betrayal. But he did it through this incredibly specific lens of oppression that, sadly, a lot of people could relate to.
He was telling human stories. They
Yeah.
just happened to be set during apartheid.
Exactly. And by doing that, he forced audiences worldwide to confront not just apartheid, but how power and prejudice work anywhere in their own lives. He made it personal and possible to ignore.
And he's doing this while living under that system, censorship, risk of being imprisoned. It's wild.
It takes immense courage, and that's something that strikes you about Fugard. He wasn't just talented, he believed in this enough to risk everything.
The articles mention, though, that he was a complex guy, even got criticism from people who admired him. How do we square that with this, hero image?
Yeah, that's a key point, and we'll get into it more as we go.
Okay.
But remember, even people fighting for good are still human, with flaws. Fugard wasn't perfect. But his commitment to using art to challenge oppression, to give a voice to those who didn't have one, that's undeniable.
Okay, so we've got this apartheid backdrop, this intense collaboration, and this guy who's both celebrated and, questioned. Where do we go from here to really understand him?
I think we got to look at the plays themselves. We talk context, but what were the stories he was telling? What themes was he grappling with? And how did those hit people in South Africa and globally? When we talk about those plays resonating, one that really hits hard is Master Harold and the Boys. It's set in this small town cafe, but man, it's powerful stuff.
Yeah, I read that one. And what got me was it's not about big political speeches or riots,
Right.
It's this quiet, almost personal story about Hallie, this young white boy, and his relationship with two Black waiters, Sam and Willie, working at the cafe.
Exactly. And in that everyday setting, Fugard just explodes this myth of casual racism.
Right.
There's that scene, man, where Hallie spits at Sam, who's basically been like a father to him.
Oh, yeah.
It's shocking. It makes you sick to your stomach, and it forces you to see how prejudice can poison even these close relationships.
And it's so effective because it's not some far-off historical thing. It's about how racism creeps into daily life, which is, sadly, still relevant no matter where you are.
That's Fugard's genius. He takes these huge systemic issues, apartheid, inequality, and he makes them human. You feel the impact not through, statistics, but through what these characters go through.
He doesn't shy away from the tough stuff either. Some critics, the article mentions, thought his idea of reconciliation was too optimistic, even naive. What do you think?
That's a debate people are still having, and it's interesting. I think Fugard truly believed in forgiveness, healing, even after all the awfulness of apartheid.
Okay.
But he didn't pretend it was easy. His plays often show the scars left behind, the struggle to trust again, how hard reconciliation really is.
So it's not like a fairy tale ending, everyone's happy.
Not at all. Take The Island, for example. It's about these two political prisoners on Robben Island, the same one where Mandela was held, and they're rehearsing a production of Antigone.
Wow. Wait, that's like a play within a play to talk about oppression and resilience.
Exactly. And through that, they deal with their own trauma, their anger, their desire for freedom. It's powerful stuff, showing how even in the darkest places, art can be this source of comfort, a way to process pain, even imagine something better.
That reminds me, the article said Fugard didn't just write plays, he taught too. Mentored a whole new generation.
The teaching, yeah, it's often forgotten, but it's a big part of his legacy. It wasn't enough for him to tell his stories. He wanted others to find their voices, use theater to make change.
I love that, like passing the torch.
It wasn't just technical stuff either. He really gave them this belief in the power of theater to fight injustice, start conversations, build community. That's a legacy that goes way beyond any single play.
This has been great, but there's one thing bugging me. The articles talk about Fugard's global impact, but were his plays truly universal, or were they, like, fundamentally South African?
That's a good question, and it gets to what makes Fugard so interesting. I think it's both.
How so?
On one hand, his plays are totally rooted in apartheid-era South Africa. The language, the characters, the places, it all comes from that context.
But then how did they connect with people who'd never experienced apartheid?
Because underneath all that, Fugard was tapping into something universal. The struggle for dignity, the fight against being oppressed, the messy relationships people have when faced with injustice. These are themes that go beyond any one time or place.
So he's using the specific to talk about the universal.
Exactly. By grounding his stories in apartheid, he makes them stronger, more urgent, and by exploring those universal themes, he invites the audience to connect on a deeper level, to see their own struggles reflected.
So that's why his plays are still performed, studied, years after apartheid ended. They're not just about a moment in history. They're about this ongoing fight for justice and equality.
Absolutely, and I think that's what makes Fugard's legacy so lasting. He wasn't just telling us what happened. He was a voice for those who couldn't speak, a champion for those being crushed, and a reminder that art can be a real weapon in the fight for a better world.
You know, all this talk about Fugard's work, the impact it had, I keep coming back to that idea, a voice for the voiceless. It sounds good, but did he ever worry about, like, speaking for people instead of with them?
Oh, that's sharp, yeah. And that gets at the heart of some of the pushback he got, even from people fighting apartheid. Got to remember, he's this white guy writing in a system designed to privilege his voice over others.
Right. So how'd he deal with that? Was he really able to lift up those voices without kind of taking over?
I think that collaborative thing we talked about is key here. Fugard didn't just write alone, then toss it to Black actors. He worked with them closely, their experiences, their language. It all got woven into the plays.
So it was more like a back and forth, not just him calling the shots.
Exactly. And this is where looking at the plays specifically gets really interesting. Like in Sizwe Banzi is Dead, there's that powerful monologue, the main character, this Black man, he's talking about how apartheid basically erased his identity.
Oh, yeah, he's forced to carry that passbook, right? That little document that says where he can go, what he can do.
Right. His whole life boiled down to that booklet. And that speech, that wasn't Fugard alone. It came from improvising, discussing with John Kani, the actor who first played the role.
Got it.
Kani brought his own life to it, made those words real in a way that really hit people.
So it's not just having diverse actors on stage, it's making that diversity part of how the art gets made.
Absolutely. And that's what I think helped Fugard avoid just speaking for others. He made a space where their voices could come through on their own terms.
This makes me think about Fugard's legacy. It's not just the plays themselves, right?
Right.
It's this whole way of working together, using theater to help those on the margins.
You got it. And that's inspiring people all over. Even today, you see more theater companies focused on telling diverse stories, working with communities that usually get left out.
Like Fugard gave them a roadmap for a more inclusive kind of theater, one that's engaged with the world.
And that's worth celebrating because in the end, Fugard New Theater isn't just entertainment. It's about holding up a mirror to society, challenging what's wrong, and creating spaces where people can actually talk and understand each other.
So for our listener who's been with us on this deep dive, what's the big takeaway? What makes Fugard's work still matter, even decades after apartheid is over?
I think it's that reminder that art can really push for change. Fugard's plays weren't just words, they were acts of resistance, cries for justice, celebrations of what makes us human, even when things are terrible.
And it's not just about the stage, right? He showed us art can be a tool to change society, help those who aren't being heard, and get people talking to each other.
Yeah, exactly. And maybe most importantly, he showed us that even in the darkest times, there's still hope.
Yeah.
And people can overcome even the worst stuff.
That's beautifully put. So as we wrap up, I'm left thinking about those words: hope, resilience, art, changing the world. Thanks for joining us on this journey into Athol Fugard's life and work.
It's been great. And for you listening, I hope this makes you wonder, what stories resonate with you? What voices need to be heard in your community? And how can you use your own talents, your own voice to make the world a bit better, a bit more just?
That's a powerful thought to end on. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep diving deep.